Hey guys, welcome back. This is part 2 of my 20th anniversary special. This is the box art of the game that would eventually get me into the Sonic the Hedgehog series. When I saw this screenshot, I remember this was the shot that ultimately made me want Wheel of Fortune for the Sega Genesis. And I remember, like I said, I remember begging my mother. I really wanted to play it. Genesis cost quite a bit, and they still do these days. And it's a great game. I love playing it. It's a fun little game to play when I'm bored. Now, if you thought that was a really good Wheel of Fortune game, this is a really, really good Wheel of Fortune game, the Sega CD version. I can play the Sega Genesis version right here, and I can play the Sega CD version right here. How about that? On my Sega 32X and my CDX. Really, really nice. So like I said, back in the summer of 2001, my cousin lent me his Genesis so I could play Wheel of Fortune on it, and he gave me some games to check out, which included some Sonic games, and I checked them out, and like I said, I was like, man, am I really going to enjoy these Sonic games? And I more than enjoyed them. I loved them. And it turns out that this came at a very interesting, it turns out I could not have picked a more interesting time to get into the Sonic series. This was the summer of 2001. This was around the time Sonic celebrated his 10th anniversary. Turns out it was a very, pardon me guys, turns out it was a very bittersweet celebration for him, because earlier that year, 2001, Sega discontinued what would be their last system, the Dreamcast. Here's my Sega Sports Edition again. The Dreamcast had been on the American market for only a year and a half when Sega decided to discontinue it. And it did not mean that Sega was done with the Dreamcast entirely. They were still making games and accessories. Pardon me, guys. I'm sorry. They were still making games and accessories for it. One game that they came out for the Dreamcast after discontinuing the Dreamcast was Sonic Adventure 2. And if you pre-ordered a special version of the game, of Sonic Adventure 2, you would get a special 10th anniversary package. Comes with a lot of cool stuff. And I have two copies of this special 10th anniversary package in my room. One is just the package itself, and the other is completely shrink-wrapped with the game. So it's a really nice addition to my Sonic collection. I got that about a couple years ago. It's kind of a reminder as to when I got into the Sonic series. Now, there are a lot of problems with the Dreamcast. I got to tell you, the Dreamcast is a very well underrated system in my opinion. And I'm not just saying this because I'm a big Sega fan. I'm saying this because it had a lot to offer, and unfortunately it's what it didn't have to offer what killed it. For one, it didn't have a DVD component like the PlayStation 2 would have. I mean, the PlayStation 2 would become the most successful system of all time. People just kept buying it to play, hey, I got a video game system and I got a DVD player. There were other problems with the Dreamcast. It lacked third-party support. The Saturn failed Sega miserably. And it failed them so miserably that Sega lost a lot of third-party support, including from Electronic Arts. So Sega decided to come out with their own sports games for the Dreamcast, and, hence the Sega Sports stuff. And then there were also problems with, the Dreamcast was a very easy victim of game piracy. It was, you could make illegal copies of games, and the Dreamcast technically could not tell, if you did it right, the Dreamcast could not tell whether or not the game it was playing, was an actual licensed copy or an illegal bootleg. but it was still a fantastic system, and it still is. And I found out recently that despite being discontinued many years back, the Dreamcast is still alive today, and ironically, one of the things that killed it, the fact that it was an easy victim of game piracy, is actually the thing that's keeping it alive. Independent developers to this day are still making some fantastic games for the Dreamcast. They say, yeah, well, let's put them on the PlayStation 4. Oh, let's put them on the Nintendo Wii U. Oh, let's put them on the Switch. Oh, let's put it on the PlayStation 3. Oh, and while we're at it, why don't we put it on the Dreamcast as well? People love the Dreamcast. And I'm one of them. It's a great system to have. I feel very lucky to have this system. But like I said, it was a tough year for Sega because, you know, January of 2001, they said they were going to discontinue it, and eventually, within a few months or so, they did discontinue the system. And like I said, discontinuation, that just simply meant they were done making Dreamcast. They had too many consoles in stock. They had too many unsold consoles in stock, and consumers were losing interest. So Sega was like, why waste our money making another system when it won't sell? And speaking of money, Sega was in a huge financial hole. There was a lot of talk about Sega going out of business. There was a lot of talk about Sega being bought by Nintendo. There was a lot of talk about Sega, and very little of any of it was good. They were in a huge financial hole. In fact, so big of a financial hole, there are a lot of people I can imagine who think, yep, Sega's done. They're done. They're out of business. And there are some people to this day who still believe that Sega went out of business. And I have to tell them, they're still in business. They are still in business. They're no longer making systems, but they're making some fantastic games. You know, for example, last year they came out with Sonic Mania. That was a huge hit. It's like, all right, if Sega's not coming out with these Sonic games, then who is? You know, on Nintendo. Well, what's the Sega logo doing here? Oh, okay, guys. You see where I'm going with that? And as a matter of fact, Sega is actually one of the top third-party publishers in the industry right now. They're doing very, very well. Sonic has proven to be their lifeblood. He's basically the guy bringing in money. And Sega's come out with a few other franchises. If you're a big Sonic fan, it's like, hey, you're a big Sonic fan. Hey, check out Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg. And I played it for a bit, and I actually have 2 copies of it. I heard it's a very rare game, so I feel very lucky to have 2 copies, one of them acting as a spare. Oh, and another game I recently bought for the Dreamcast, Choo Choo Rocket. I've yet to play it, but it looks good. But yeah, I mean, Sega's doing very well, and, you know, a lot of those myths about Sega going out of business, they've proven to be false. But it could have very easily been a different story had it not been for their chairman, Ai Sawakawa. Ai Sawakawa was the man who saved Sega. He's a big hero in my opinion. There are a lot of Sega fans out there who say he's a hero. Now, one of the things that Akawa tried to do was that he tried to keep the Dreamcast going for as long as possible. If I'm right, Sega had a very good relationship with Microsoft, who at the time was coming out with the original Xbox console. In fact, you can see here on the Dreamcast, compatible with Windows CE. So it was a really good sign that Sega had a very good relationship with Microsoft. In fact, some Sonic games that were on the Sega Saturn and the Sega Genesis, they ended up being ported to the computer, which was nice. And so Akawa tried to strike a deal with Microsoft, saying, "Guys, is there any way your Xbox console can be compatible with Dreamcast games?" And it was ultimately a deal that didn't work out. And I think it was because had the Xbox been compatible with Dreamcast games, I think that would have driven up the price of the Xbox, and I just didn't think it was and Microsoft, as much as they would love to do it, they just couldn't. So Kawa spent pretty much a whole bunch of money on nothing. All of his efforts to try and keep the Dreamcast going were in vain. and he wanted his money back. But as the Dreamcast was fighting a losing battle to keep itself going, especially against the PlayStation 2, Ikawa was fighting a losing battle of his own against cancer. And he knew that he was not going to win this fight. So what he did was, he still had quite a bit of money on him. And he decided to do a couple things. He basically said to Sega, guys, all that money you owe me, let's just say that never happened. He basically forgave all of Sega's debts to him. And this is what from what I read, you know, this is what I'm getting from what I read. So he basically forgave Sega's debts to him. And the other thing was, like I said, he had a lot of money on him. And he said, guys, once I'm gone, once cancer takes me, all that money, all the money that I still have, that money's yours. He said he was basically going to give his money to Sega once he was gone. And Sega badly needed the money. And I think it was March 24th, no, pardon me, March 16th of 2001 that Ikawa lost his battle with cancer. And this was just under 2 months after Sega announced that they were going to discontinue the Dreamcast. That was January 24th. But, and although it was kind of a, it was, of course, a really sad death, but in the end, his actions helped save Sega. They are doing like I said, they are doing very, very well right now. And, just a few months later, Sonic celebrated his 10th anniversary, and it just so happened that that's when I got into him. It was just a complete coincidence that I got into him. And ever since Sega dropped out of the hardware market, I mean, along with the myths saying that they've gone out of business, they've become quite the underdog in the world of video gaming. There's a lot of anti-Sega talk, and there's a lot of anti-Sonic talk. It's like, but I'm willing to stick up for him. I think about it being so skeptical of him, and now I'm so supportive of him that I really don't like listening to a lot of trash talk. I remember that's actually why I stopped watching this one video game review show on XPlay, and I remember the host of the show, Adam Sessler and Morgan Webb. I remember my brother was watching an episode, and this was back in late 2007, and they were trash talk. And here's Adam Sessler and Morgan Webb. They're trash talking the daylights out of Sonic. And I'm waiting for them to say just one good thing about him, just one. And it's like they never do. Webb ends it with, Sonic, see you in hell. And I says, I am never watching this show again. I am never going to watch this show ever again. And I never did. But I remember a few years later, it was fall of 2013, I stumbled across JonTron's channel over at YouTube, and I started watching some of his videos. I remember I was looking for stuff about this one video game called Space Ace, and I stumbled upon him, and it's like, why? And I'm watching his videos, I'm like, who is this guy? So I decided to check him out for some videos, and I came across this one video about Sonic R for the Sega Saturn, and it was titled, Sonic R is the best game ever! And I'm like, oh boy, here we go. And despite me not enjoying listening to trash talk about Sonic, I decided to watch the video anyways. And it proved to be a good decision, because eventually I started to learn. He had some other videos about Sonic, and it took me a while. It took me watching these videos again, and then it hits me, and it's like, it's not that they hate him just for the sake of hating him. It's that just they're unhappy with with a lot of his recent titles. I mean, Sonic 06. I mean, that was bad. I mean, I understand how bad it was. It was a very frustrating game for me to complete, but I was so supportive of him, I was willing to see it through. And of course I have, let me see, I have Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric. Yes, oh, that was I didn't mind either of the two games. Sonic 06 was pretty frustrating, and it was difficult for me to do Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric at first, but once I figured out how the game worked, it was like, alright, now I know how this game is. So, it was pretty much clear sailing from here on in. The dialogue was a little annoying, I admit. And Sonic R, my biggest gripe with that, it had 5 tracks. Sonic Forces, I know that came out back in November. It could have been a more complete game. It could have had more to offer, but I love playing it. I can't go a day without it. I love playing as, you know, the custom characters and playing some of the short stages. It's a lot of fun. Doing the daily challenges and just, you know, doing stuff with some of my fan characters that I have, and then I put them up at DeviantArt. So, yeah. But, like I said, I've been willing to see Sonic, you know, through to the end. He makes me feel very proud to be a 90s kid. And, I remember November of 2016, I was going through a really rough time, and I turned to this one game I have for the GameCube, Sonic Adventure DX. It's a game my brother and I had beaten years before, but I still play it because of the sandbox element. I love getting lost with Amy Rose, one of my favorite characters in the franchise. I love getting lost with her in the Mystic Ruins Forest. So I just did that to kind of distract myself from what was going on in the real world, and I realized, and that's when it hit me. It was staring me in the face the whole time. He offers me a nice, peaceful, tranquil, and happy escape from the horrors and cruelties and violence that the real world doesn't seem to hesitate to throw at me. And that's what makes Sonic such a great series. He offers me an escape. He's a great guy, and I thank him so much because, you know, he's made a big impact on who I am today. So I thank him so much, and a lot of people have continued to show their support for them, because without his support, he wouldn't have been going as far as he has. So it's great. So yeah, it's a wonderful moment. But yeah, that's pretty much the story of how I got into video gaming. That's the story of how I got into Sonic, and it's really a really interesting story that proves that, you know, you never thought you'd get into something, and then you become so infatuated with it and so supportive of it, and it's terrific. But that's the story of how I got into some stuff that I never thought I was going to get involved with. So with all that said, this is German-Name 1990 speaking. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys again soon. See you later, guys. Thank you so much.